Excellencies, colleagues, all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, greetings, and welcome to SIDS Talk Plastics. My name is Saeed Hamid, Ocean Advisor with the Alliance of Small Island States, AOSIS. Today marks a particularly special episode of SIDS Talk Plastics, as it is our 10th episode and 1 year since the launch of SIDS Talk Plastics. We thank you for your support of these dialogues over the past year, and to this end, we have convened a list of distinguished speakers to discuss today's topic, Reflections on INC4 and Road to Busan, where INC5 will be held later this year. Before we proceed with our dialogue, please allow me to introduce our distinguished list of speakers. His Excellency Ambassador Luteru, Permanent Representative of Samoa to the United Nations and Chair of AOSIS. His Excellency Ambassador Luis Valles-Valdivieso, Chair of the Plastic Pollution INC. Ms. Asha Challenger from the Permanent Mission of Antigua and Barbuda to the United Nations and the SIDS INC Bureau Representative. Ms. Gwen Cizior, Permanent Mission of Palau to the United Nations and Contact Group Co-Chair. Thank you all for taking the time to start today. Before any further delays, please allow me to introduce Ambassador Luteru, who will be giving the welcome remarks for today's session. Excellency, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Saeed and colleagues. Good morning from New York. Let me extend a very warm welcome to you all and thank you for attending the 10th installment of the SIDS Talk Plastics. A special thanks to Ambassador Luis, Chair of the INC, for taking the time to share his remarks and contribution on the theme of today's session, Reflection on INC4 and the Road to Busan. SIDS Talk Plastic has been an initiative of the Chair's team with the primary goal to advance dialogue on the key issues and priorities of SIDS in the plastic pollution negotiation space. INC4 was a critical session in this process, which allowed us to negotiate on the basis of the revised draft text and streamline the text further. Moreover, we are pleased to have the concluded session with a mandate for intersessional work and the decision to establish the legal drafting group. However, with the ambitious goal to complete the work of the INC by the end of this year, and with INC5 fast approaching, there is much work to be done to effectively put an end to plastic pollution. Plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, poses devastating impact on SIDS livelihood, economies, health, and the environment. Our unique geographic conditions, limited resources, and sensitive economic sectors, such as tourism and fishing, which are most vulnerable to external shocks, put SIDS at the forefront of the plastic pollution issue. AOSIS therefore remain firm in our call for an ambitious, effective, and actable internationally legally binding instrument that addresses a full life cycle approach to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. The instrument must be supported by a new, additional, adequate, and predictable means of implementation with priority access for small island developing states. In line with established precedent in existing agreements, the instrument must also fully take into account the special circumstances of SIDS and our unique vulnerabilities to this issue. Today, we have convened a panel of negotiators from across the SIDS regions to share their experiences at INC4 and their expectations for the journey to Busan where INC5 is expected to be the final negotiating session. Thank you all once again for attending. We look forward to an engaging and fruitful discussion with our speakers who have taken the time to participate today. As we prepare for INC5, dialogues such as this remain critical to highlighting SIDS priorities, challenges, and issues faced in effectively ending plastic pollution once and for all. I thank you for your attention.
Most grateful, Ambassador Luteru. We will now invite Ambassador Luis to deliver some general opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Said. And also, I want to congratulate you for organizing, AOSIS for organizing this SIDS Talk Plastic series. And I want to thank also and congratulate the leadership of AOSIS. And also, and you can see that leadership, and I want to thank you also for your words, Ambassador Luteru, AOSIS chair, and also, as I mentioned, for your leadership in this process. Also, my gratitude goes to our colleague and dear friend, Asha Challenger, our colleague in the Bureau. She's a Bureau member, and also the rapporteur of the INC process. And also our dear friend, Gwen Sisior, who is a co-chair, co-chair of the INC, also including co-chairing the intersessional work, our formal intersessional work. As you can see, you have a wonderful, and I want to underline that leadership in our process. What is our mission here? Our mission is to end plastic pollution. That's our goal. That's what we are looking for. And you have mentioned, Ambassador Luteru, the importance of this process for SIDS. I was a few months ago, I was in Rapa Nui, and I could see those needs that you are mentioning, those particularities that you are mentioning. So completely agree with what you say. And that's what we need, why we need to end plastic pollution. For that, we need a good treaty. We need an ambitious treaty. We need a treaty with credible rules that will end plastic pollution. And I'm happy to say that we had a good INC4. For the first time, we saw countries negotiating on text, bracketing, unbracketing, etc. But we didn't see that before. It is too late, yes. For me, that should have happened before. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. That's our reality, but it was good in INC4 that we could see countries negotiating on text. We also had a decision on formal intersessional work. And as I mentioned, our dear friend Wen, she's one of our co-chairs in that formal intersessional work. It was a very important decision that we took during INC4, also that we were not able to do it before, unfortunately. Another important decision is that we established the legal drafting group that, again, something that we should have done it before, but now we did it. So that's the reality we have. We have a good INC4. We should have had a lot of things that we accomplished in this session before, and we need to have that in mind, that we have only one more INC. And your meeting today is also about the path to that meeting of INC5 in Busan. And that's very important to have in mind, that we need to optimize our work. We need to work hard in this intersessional period also to have a very effective and delivering a treaty for the, or an agreement on text for the 1st of December. I will, stop there because we are going to have a very important discussion now, and also to come with some conclusions after also listening to the great panelists that we have today in this meeting. And once again, thank you very much for your invitation. Very happy to be here. I will be very happy to participate in any other meeting that you will kindly invite me. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Ambassador. And it's always a pleasure for us to have you. So the door is open to any other future SIDS Talk Plastics. Without any further delay, let's proceed to our interactive dialogue with Gwen and Asha. And I will also encourage Excellencies, if you would like to intervene at any point, please let us know. We will have an interactive dialogue at this point. Where we will discuss our reflections on INC4 and our expectations for INC5. So Gwen and Asha, I have a few burning questions for you today. I hope we can see a very productive discussion ensuing. I think just to get the ball rolling, I think a good starter question would be, what were your views on the extent of progress made so far in the INC and especially at INC4? Perhaps we can start with Asha, followed by Gwen.
Good day, everyone, and thank you very much, Saeed. Thank you to, oh, sorry. Apologies, I'm having some, yes. Apologies for that. Yes, so thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much to Ambassadors Luteru and Ambassador Luis for taking the time to join us, and very happy to participate in this interactive dialogue here today. So first of all, the extensive work at INC4. I think at INC4 we were able to get much further on many, many areas than we have in this process. I think Ambassador Luis mentioned a few of them particularly. We were able to advance significantly on the text. We had a compilation text that we were able to do quite a few read-throughs with the due to the great assistance of our co-facilitators, Gwen being one of them. Thank you so much. So that was positive. On a few areas, we were even able to get to text-based negotiations, which was very positive and helpful, where we were able to narrow down quite a few options to some more general ideas that we hope delegations will be able to make some compromises and maybe choose one or the other. That's always ideal. Another really, really good outcome for this meeting was our formal intersessional work, which we have been asking for since Uruguay. We have 2 expert working groups that I know a lot of hard work is going into as we speak to prepare for us all to go to Bangkok in basically a few weeks, where we will dig down into some areas of significant importance to us as delegations, particularly, so there's the one on chemicals of concern and there's the financial mechanisms. And as SIDS, I know these are things we've been asking for again since INC1. So we're ready to roll up our sleeves and really get into the details of these discussions. And I know we'll talk about this later, but we're really hoping that these can meaningfully contribute to our work in INC5. That's the point of intersessional work. We want to pull some ideas out and finalize them when we get to plenary and INC5. INC chair also mentioned the legal drafting group, which also is being, I anticipate that nominations are coming in as we speak, so we look forward to hearing details on the modalities of how that will work, as we think that this could be a very, very useful tool and committee in finalizing our work, doing that final legal drafting when we get to some more agreement on the text. And so this lead, we were also able to come together and I think we really worked through. There were some issues of I would not, for want of a better word, more controversial issues in terms of plastic production, where I think delegations really got to state their positions. So I think we have a better sense of where we lie on some of these contentious issues, and we have to start these difficult discussions in order to get to outcomes. So I was happy to see that. And also, but I have to say that while we did make these strides, I do wish that we would have been further along in this process as INC4. We have one scheduled meeting left, and it will take a lot of hard work for us to really come up with an effective, fit for purpose, future-proof agreement that, future generations will look back and see that this made an impact if we want to finish in INC5. So we have a lot of work to do. It's not impossible. We have our able chair. I know SIDS are committed. We will be there. We will be participating. But there's a lot of work to do on many, many issues. And I'm hoping that through these informal discussions, through the formal intersessional work, and just some planning, strategizing, and honest discussions, we can have a way forward to come to get to the agreement that we need. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Asha. Gwen, a few thoughts to share here?
Sure. Thank you, Saeed, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to again see Ambassador Luteru and Ambassador Luis on this SIDS Talk Plastic. So the question, I believe Asha pretty much has stated most of the important points. The only thing I might add is I was really happy to see that although countries were very specific on their stance, they showed flexibility by participating, knowing so that we could move forward with negotiations. So, and I think as Asha pointed out, this is something we've also been waiting on for us to actually have these discussions and these negotiations to move this text forward. And of course, we're hoping to see that during the intersessional work so that we can, again, further contribute to that process. Thank you.
Thank you both. I think you both raised some excellent points. I think I fully agree in terms of INC4 being the first time we were diving into the substance of the agreement, I think, and it allowed for member states to fully negotiate and show some flexibility, but also understand some of the more difficult positions that have kind of plagued the INC since the very beginning. And of course, intersessional work, something AOSIS has been championing since day one, as Asha mentioned. We're happy to see that outcome as well. Secondly, I would be curious to know how was your experience with the modalities of working at INC4 though, and any recommendations you might have on the organization of work moving forward. Perhaps we can start with Gwen this time and then Asha.
Thank you, Saeed. That's a very good question. I think there was quite a bit of confusion throughout the process. So people weren't sure how this new structure we have would work. But I think as soon as they understood it, they were able to sort of better participate. But the one thing what is a good thing about this process is it allowed us to focus sort of an in-between requests. We were able to, there are people who wanted to discuss specific items. There are people who have noted that these items need to be discussed not in its own space. So we were able to sort of have a process that met in between where we were able to focus on a particular subset and discuss them together, but still maintain a certain division to allow so then the workload won't be too heavy to discuss it all at once. Because I think if we were, it's the INC3 process, we had sort of just at the contact group level. So we had to, in order to sort of go through the discussion is to discuss each individual items, not really have a full discussion. But I was hoping more to see more of a fluid discussion rather than just statements on those particular, and I'm hoping that we can further improve on that because I think that discussion needs to happen. We were hoping it would happen in the subgroupings, but I think we still need to improve on that. Unfortunately, I do not have a solution, but I think this is where hopefully we can start it in also in the intersessional work to have a more fluid discussion. So discussion happen rather than just particular statements. And then so that again, we can further negotiate as well as come to a conclusion or an agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. Asha?
Thank you. And I must agree with Gwen. I think that so at INC4 was where we introduced the contact groups and the subgroups. And I think that this allowed for more distilled discussions on these specific issues and also took away some of the load from our co-facilitators who were really, really lifting significant portions of this text. So Gwen, we thank you for bringing us this far. We appreciate your work, but allowing, and it also allowed for wider ownership of the text. We have co-facilitators from all regions. I think that's also beneficial. So I know that there were concerns early in the process about some delegations not being heard. Everyone is represented. All facets of this discussion have a seat in the co-facilitators, and we thank the chair for ensuring that happened. And we do believe that the process is and will be better because of that. I also agree with Gwen that so while this new process was introduced, there was a bit of confusion in the beginning. The first earlier days, there were a lot of questions, how, when, where. But I think once we settled in, it took a little while for us to get comfortable. But I think we were able to figure out what we were requested to do, and I think for the most part that we were able to adequately meet that. So some earlier clarification might be better in terms of better preparation for us all. But I think before too long, we were able to settle into that. And I agree with Gwen also that, so perhaps maybe because it was sort of the first time we were really digging into the text, it seems a little more like statements, but I'm really hoping that through the intersessional work and at INC5, we can get more sleeves rolled up and negotiating where we can really look at options and find suitable compromises. So that's the extent of the modalities. So appreciate the new contact group and subgroup structure. I think that definitely strengthened the process, but some more clarity might be needed on specific mandates. Who's doing text-based, when we're doing that? How will that be reflected? I recall there was an upload process, and there was some confusion as to where that text was going. How would that text be reflected? So those sorts of things, we're hoping that we can work through that earlier rather than later. And I'm happy to see that the chair has raised his hand to respond.
Thank you, Asha. Ambassador Luis, please proceed.
No, thank you very much, Said, and thank you so much to Asha and Gwen. It's very important what you are mentioning, both of you, about the INC4. As I mentioned, yes, we did have good decisions. I think it was important that we start negotiating, like it has been mentioned, but it's still a long way to go still. And what we have to consider is also that if we keep working the same way that we work during INC4, with the same pace in our negotiations, actually it will be very difficult. And I have to tell you, it will be difficult to have a text agreed for the 1st of December, for the end of INC5. We need to revise our working plan. The comments mentioned by Gwen and by Asha are very important. I agree completely that we did need more organization in our modalities, in the sense our mandate to the co-chairs and co-facilitators. Yes, we had different in one point different way of working in different subgroups, but still, we did advance, and we need to consider that. And also we saw a good negotiation environment that we need to bring into INC5. But again, we need to revise our working plan, our structure for working. I think to come to a suggestion or to come with a proposal of that structure will take some time, because we need first to agree on what we want at the INC5. Yes, we know that we want an effective text, we want a robust treaty. For that, what do we need? We need, for instance, to agree in this intersessional period about elements, or the core elements that we could negotiate and agreed in INC5. More is a question than a proposal. But I think we need to find those ways to have an effective INC5. We have a compile a text that is being compiled by the Secretariat. For me, you know, it will be difficult to say, yes, we could start with that text, which is possible. Yes, we could do that. But if we had more than one INC, and we all want to finish these negotiations for the end of the year with a robust treaty. So again, you know, how we do manage that text that will be presented to us after the Secretary has compiled. Again, a possibility is identifying those core elements, that backbone of our future treaty. For instance, that could be a possibility. For that, we need to work very hard again in this intersessional period. We have, yes, and I could answer about the formal intersessional period that we will have with the virtual meetings and the meetings in Bangkok, or the meeting in person in Bangkok. But also we will have an informal intersessional period where we will have HOTS meetings. I'm going to invite heads of delegations for virtual meetings. I want to have, and I would like to invite a HOTS meeting in person, for instance, the first week of October or around the beginning of October, for instance, to talk about this, to talk about what we need in INC5 to have a robust text agreed for the 1st of December. So those are my general comments at this point. Of course, you know, any other question or comment, I'm happy to respond. Thank you, Said.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I think that's a really excellent segue into the next question. But before I proceed with the third question, I just wanted to remind attendees to please use the Q&A function if you have any questions for our panelists. And on the third question, we know that it is basically what are the key elements that the treaty must contain to meet the goal of ending plastic pollution. We know that AOSIS has championed that we must remain committed to Resolution 514 and the provisions that are prescribed therein. But I would be curious to hear from our panelists on what are some of those key elements that must be contained in the instrument to meet the goal of ending plastic pollution. Asha?
Thank you, Said. And I have to reflect on some of the points that our chair just said. We have to be practical moving into INC5. While we absolutely need to remain faithful to Resolution 514 as the framework or as the structure for this process, we also have to recognize that everything does not need to go into treaty text. So that's, I think that would be that would take some treading through as many of us want specific, you know, this is what my capital, this is my mandate, so I want exactly this. So we have to move away from that as we don't have a lot of time. So I like what he said about the backbone of the treaty. With that being said, I do have some specific, you know, SIDS related asks that, you know, we have been championing from the beginning. And I'll start with, and this is not in any particular order, but this is just as reflections are going, a robust financial mechanism. We need the support to implement this. SIDS have been saying from the beginning, we want to be able to effectively implement this treaty. As every time we speak, we talk about our oceans, we talk about our communities, we talk about our livelihoods being impacted by plastic pollution. And the solutions are many times out of our resources reach. There are many legislative. I think most SIDS have done the legislative work. We have our legislation, or we're working through the legislation. We have our plastic bag bans, but sometimes the technology, it's the actual mechanisms to do the cleanup, to transform our industries is where we need the support. And we're hoping that the financial mechanism can be put in place sooner rather than later, that can be robust, adequate to meet these needs. We also really ensured, so plastic pollution impacts the health and the environment. So we need to ensure that there is regulation of hazardous chemicals and additives. This is something that's very important. We need to know at the very least what's going into the plastic products that we drink from that are literally all around us all the time. So that transparency and regulation, some of these things just don't need to be put into these products that we hope can be a backbone or framework from that through this process. We also are very interested in product design and designing products for reusability, for recyclability, for easy disposal and environmental management so that we don't have the end of life issues. So that's something that I know SIDS have been talking about. We also are very interested in alternatives and how these alternatives are being decided, the makeup of these alternatives. We want to be able to understand that we're not putting in place alternatives that we regret in the future. And also while I don't think that this is the solution, circularity must be part of the discussion in terms of ensuring that plastics are being produced and managed in a more circular way. And also from Antigua and Barbados specifically, we are interested in production reduction, as we do think that we have to turn off the tap at the top in order to prevent the long-term and eventual mismanagement of plastics. So those are some of the things that from my delegation, and I do think that these are generally reflected in the SIDS positions throughout this. Thanks.
Thank you, Asha. Gwen, any thoughts to share?
No, I think Asha has already raised them as well. But I guess just to sort of give that overview is that life cycle approach is very important because there is no one solution fits all when it comes to plastics. We know that we need plastics. It's ingrained in every aspect of our lives. And I think from Palau's perspective, it's not really about just completely banning plastics. It's how do we make plastics more sustainable, more safe, and that requires that we have to look at it from that whole perspective. But also, and all of this perspective, whether it's toxicity and all that, all contributes to pollution. So I guess part of it is also how we define our pollution. It's not just the physical pollution that we see, but it's also the pollution that's affecting our bodies. And this leads to, so this is why toxicity, health, and environment is very critical. So I guess for us, what the critical elements to be is addressing not only the amount of potentially, well, basically the life cycle process, but looking at it more of a where can we address these areas that it may not be like every single stage, but maybe grouped in more of like we spoke to upstream, downstream, and midstream and downstream. What are these in the upstream? Where is it that we need to actually address rather than maybe not the whole entire, but in what area can we address that has then this trickle down effect all the way downstream? And then from downstream, how do we design it to come back? So this whole entire, so as Asha mentioned, circularity has to be kept in mind as we're negotiating this, knowing that we are still trying to utilize the products, but it has to be in a circular way. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen and Asha. And what I'm getting is like, it's really hard to pick and choose along the life cycle because of how interrelated the different activities are. Like design will have implications for how we recycle or how we manage waste. Like all of the different steps in the cycle are kind of connected in certain regards. And even when you look at it through the lens of pollution, there are pollution aspects upstream, midstream, and also downstream. So I think continuing to look at it through that lens is very important to the process and whatever we eventually agree on in terms of the substance of the agreement. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the intersessional work that's upcoming in Bangkok from the 24th to the 28th of August. How do you envision the execution of this work and its contributions to the negotiations in a meaningful way? I know there was some concern about how do we ensure the intersessional work, it's directly fed into the INC process and allows us to accelerate the negotiations. How do you view your expectations for this work? I can start with Gwen this time and then Asha.
Thank you, Saeed. I think that's part of the question that people keep asking, and I hope to be able to have a perfect answer, but I don't. But what we would like to be able to see is that whatever outcomes come out of the intersessional work answers the questions that parties have had regarding many of the core obligations under Part 2. So let's take, for example, in some of the discussions that we had in INC3 and INC4 was some of the decisions we couldn't make on whether or not we could keep an element because we weren't sure to what extent the annexes, so the specific items that will appear underneath each of those elements, would be, and therefore we cannot make that decision. And I'm hoping that at least for the intersessional work, we can clarify what these, for example, what these criterias are, what the scope and the level of these criteria, so that we can see whether or not this is an element that we can then agree to. But really, at this point in time, it's really about, because it's covering product design, it's covering chemicals and polymers, and these are very contentious elements. So hopefully through the intersessional work, the discussions on what these elements would entail would give more confidence to the members to be able to then move forward on agreeing and negotiating for in INC5. I'll just stop there, and maybe Asha can also provide some input.
Thank you, Gwen. Asha, please go ahead.
Thanks, Said, and I'm glad that Gwen answered this question first, because we're hoping to hear from the co-facilitators their plans for the intersessional work. We're all very excited to participate. As I've said, these are two issues that SIDS have been championing and asking for the discussions and from INC1. So we hope that in the very least we can have some targeted recommendations that can be distilled into draft text in some way, shape, or form. And I appreciate this is asking a lot, but we really we have a lot to do. So we have to ensure that we take fullest advantage of this intersessional work, this in-person intersessional work. The time, folks are taking time out of their summer holidays to go to Bangkok for this. So we really have to ensure that that this is put to the best use possible. And I think, like I said, some targeted recommendations on key areas can inform our discussions, where recommendation X can be seen through some options in draft text that we can then find compromise and negotiation on. Again, I have to wait and see what our able co-facilitators and the chair and also the Bureau come up with in terms of the way forward for this. So I can't really preempt this discussion, but I would like to say no pressure, but there is a fair amount of pressure for this to be successful and most effective. So and you have my commitment to see how we can work through the Bureau, getting views from SIDS constituents. I'm very happy when we get some excellent ideas from our constituents that I share at the Bureau meeting. So so we have a stake in this as well. So we should participate as much as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Asha and Gwen, and thank you as well for your work, Asha and the Bureau, and Gwen as co-chair of Contact Group 1. I know it's not an easy task, but we appreciate all that you do on behalf of the SIDS, but also in contributing to the process. I think you raised some really excellent points there in the intersessional work. There are two very critical areas, especially in that first one with criteria in terms of design and chemicals and polymers. I think the intersessional work will provide an opportunity to really go deeper than we have gone before on some of these critical issues. But I think just going back to the INC4 recommendations and views, we should try to avoid that with the intersessional work, in the sense that clear instructions, clear mandate, clear organization, so that people come well prepared to know what are the core issues we're going to be getting into, what is the format of the discussions, so that we don't, so that we hit the ground running, learning from the experiences we had recently at INC4. I think that will be extremely critical, and also timely communication of these instructions will be critical as well. As we all, as Asha said, take time off in the summer to go to Bangkok, which I guess you could just change your travel plans to do Thailand instead. All right, well, thank you, Asha and Gwen. I have one final question, which I think is kind of related to a question someone put into the Q&A about the expectations for INC5. With one session remaining, how can we advance the negotiations, especially in some of these critical areas of divergence? And what are the expectations for INC5? This time around, we can start with Gwen and then Asha.
Thank you, Saeed. I really don't know how to answer this question. I think there's quite a high expectation that we need to finish at INC5, and the question is, everybody has their ideas of how that will be accomplished. The question really is, is really assessing where we are. How can we fully utilize the intersessional work to be able to then accomplish that? And right now, I think for INC5, we need to come prepared for hard negotiations. And I think we need to stop shying away from these harder discussions about what these elements can be. And I think, as the Ambassador Luis had noted, that we need to identify what are these core elements that we want in this treaty. We need to understand that we can't have everything, but the question is, when all at once in the treaty, but where can we be able to, when can we achieve? And maybe this is a discussion that we also need to have, is really about what are the core elements that we need to have in the treaty that will enable us to then have those other discussions to cover the other elements that we also deem important along the way. And I think we also need to understand that this is a treaty that we're trying to build and to be able to have, to address the issue of pollutions. We're not going to be able to put everything that we want in the treaty, but we need to decide what is the baseline that we need to have, what are these core elements, and then build upon that, not losing all of those elements that are not incorporated, but then how do we ensure that there is a roadmap towards achieving everything after that. But yeah, I think the expectation for having a very ambitious treaty is something that we as Palau want, and want to be able to achieve it, but we also need to be realistic and practical about what can be done and by INC5, and then how do we then move the needle forward after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. Asha, any thoughts to share?
Yes, I think I agree with what Gwen is saying. Essentially, we have to prioritize and we have to focus. AOSIS and SIDS have been saying that UNIA 514 provides the guidance and the scope for what we need to do. And I think once we use that as our guide, I think we can focus and come up with basically the baseline for what we need to put into a treaty at this point in time. I know that in the past, AOSIS have asked for sort of not a framework, because a framework has a certain connotation, but essentially understanding that we need to have these certain baselines and, mandate the COP or mandate subsidiary bodies to do some of the really technical scientific analysis that we need to do to make effective decisions. Sometimes it feels like we want to decide on criteria sitting in the negotiation room. And Antigua and Barbuda's delegation is not prepared for that at that point in time. We want to defer that to experts who will be able to take the time needed to make these very, very technical decisions regarding the health impacts and scientific and of these chemicals that we're discussing. We want to sort of set these baselines in this treaty. And I think we can agree on that. But we have to resist the urge to get too specific, too detailed. Again, like I said, Resolution 514, I think paragraph 2 or 3 had a list of what we mandate and what this treaty requires. And if we refer to that, we go back to that, we see if what we can tick off of that list. I think we can come up with a treaty that that we can build out as the future, build out in the future to meet our specific needs. That's a roundabout answer. But I think we just have to sort of refocus. I think the chair referred to the text, and the text has a lot of info, just a lot. And we have to really decide and see what needs to be in the treaty in order for this treaty to be effective. And some of us may have to delete some of our favorite things, and we'll see how that goes. But I think that's sort of how we're looking at it at this point in time.
Thank you, Asha and Gwen. I fully agree. I feel like there needs to be a distillation process. And I think from INC1, AOSIS has long been championing that we needed to talk about structure of the agreement, because we kept envisioning that the agreement would develop over time, taking into account data, science, technology, and ensuring that the mechanisms are there for the baseline of the treaty, so we can continue to have an organic treaty that is responsive to the urgency of the matter. Ambassador Luis, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Said. Well, you just said what I wanted also to mention, but to get to that point, to get to the point of the expectations that we have for INC5, I think are high. We want this robust treaty. We want this ambitious text for the end of INC5. So if you allow me, I go back a little to our question before about intersessional work. I think because it's so important. It's so important what it has been mentioned by Gwen and by Asha, of the importance of the outcome also of the expert groups that will meet virtually and then also in person in Bangkok. That's very important, and how we deal with that outcome in our negotiation, because the intersessional work, the formal intersessional work is experts meeting in virtually and then in Bangkok, is also with the resource people, the technical resource people that will also help in these discussions. Is not a negotiation. But also, as I mentioned before, we have this informal intersessional period, informal intersessional work that we will carry on with heads of delegations, also with regional meetings. Also, I will have, of course, bilateral meetings, and we also have, and it's very important to see all the activity from stakeholders, from observers, from civil society, from scientific community. All this work intersessionally will end in INC5 with an effective negotiation. Then again, the two aspects that we have mentioned already, that it was mentioned by Asha and Gwen. We have this document, the compiled document, that is quite large. We have to deal with it. So why not to think about a compressed one, in the way that also Asha and Gwen have mentioned about the key elements or the core elements that we need to deal in INC5, negotiate, and I am confident too that we will agree on those elements to have a robust treaty, also thinking that this treaty needs to be alive, needs to be strengthened in the future. We have the periods between the INC5 and the diplomatic conference with a preparatory meeting before the diplomatic conference. Then we have a period between the diplomatic conference and the first COP that actually might take some time. The experience gives us, around 2 or 3 years, that we need also activity about implementation, means of implementation, cooperation, international cooperation. It's so important also to robust, to make it a stronger and stronger, that treaty. What we had, and I agree completely what Asha mentioned about a decision 514 that we need to follow. Of course, that's our guide. That's our path that we need to follow. Whole life cycle that SIDS is very keen in mentioning is so important that to have that in mind, to have on the table in the negotiations. So we can work, with the elements that we could identify, that we could discuss, as I said, negotiate, and agreed in INC5, but those elements has to be the core elements to have this robust treaty. So that's quite important to keep it in mind. Once again, you know, I think that's the way. I'm confident that we could do it, but we need a lot of work to get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Luis. I will now give the floor to Ambassador Luteru.
Thank you very much, Saeed. And can I thank Asha and Gwen for their response? Interesting. I have to admit I'm not an expert on this issue, so it's interesting to hear their perspective. And of course, the response from Ambassador Luis. My comments is basically going to be more at the political level. I think, you know, we have to acknowledge that, you know, sometime we can go as far as we can with the technical aspect, and that is not in any way downgrading the work that is done by our expert. But I think it's just the nature also of negotiation. And firstly, I think, you know, one of the constraints that I see, obviously, and I think it's obvious to everyone, is the time constraint that we have. And therefore, when you look at the time between now and INC4, it's not really, you know, enough time, given from what you have articulated, outstanding issues. And some of these also require quite a lot of sort of discussions and conversation between all the parties concerned. So I think we need to have a look then. The question is intersessional. I think we all agree that this is the period in which we will try to secure agreement, if we could, on some of these issues, or at least agree on principles that will guide us towards agreement on text. And I think that is a useful way of doing it. So I think, you know, we have to be innovative in terms of our preparation as we move forward, because, you know, if we're not, it's going to be very difficult, as I hear all of you say. It's going to be difficult doing INC4 if we want to finalize the agreement. Going along with that, and I've heard from you, perhaps the need to be flexible. And I think you referred to that, INC4, the willingness to be flexible in terms of securing agreement on some of the difficult issues. And I think this is an important part of the process in terms of filtering our issues. I think we all recognize that when we engage in these conversation and ultimately negotiations, we bring our national perspective and our national issues and our national priorities in the process. But then when we move to our group, for example, when we go to AOSIS, sometimes we need to leave behind some of these and see what is in the best interest of the group as a whole. And I think when we move to the next stage of our negotiation, and I'm not saying that, you know, and this is where we now have to think of what is in the best interest of everyone. And I think you are all also aware of the saying that, you know, we should never allow, or we should caution against allowing perfection to get in the way of good progress, because we're never going to be perfect. I think it's our attempt to make sure that we take on board all the issues that are important to everyone. But I think Gwen said that it's just impossible to take everything on board. So I think that some of these sort of consideration from the political dimension also needs to be taken on board. And I think we do recognize the work, you know, that needs to be achieved between now and INC5. And I wish all of you the very best. And, you know, from our side, the AOSIS, I think my team are very committed, and they would, with everyone, I think Asha and Gwen and others, I'd like to thank all of you for your commitment and very strong participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Luteru. Given the time remaining, I think then we could extend a thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate you participating in today's session, and we'll give the floor to Ambassador Luis for some final remarks. I think Ambassador Luteru raised some really important points, and one of the highlights I wanted to mention to you, Ambassador Luis, is our appreciation for the heads of delegations informals that we had before INC4. We thought those were very productive platforms to hear from members in the process. We look forward to hearing your plans for perhaps further heads of delegations meetings in advance of INC5, but perhaps more focused so that we're able to get into some of the more key issues as we proceed to the last session. So please, Ambassador Luis, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Said, and thank you very much, Ambassador Luteru, for your inspiring words and also for what you mentioned about the political support, political level support, high level support from our authorities. That's quite important. As you just mentioned, you know, we do have great negotiators. We have countries, you know, like SIDS, quite active and very constructive negotiators, but it's important at political level. We heard in INC4 also the possibility or the proposal, more than a possibility, proposal from Germany, for instance, to invite into a ministerial conference before INC5. I think that's a very good idea. It's an initiative from countries open to all members, open to all ministers to participate, to give that political support, because it's important for this process and for negotiators, for the delegations, not only to hear that we are doing well, that this process is important, that is important to end plastic pollution because of the environment, also because it's killing us, human health. It's important, but also to come with what we want or what the countries they expect in this treaty for the end of INC5. So that's important. And coming back to what Said mentioned about the heads of delegation meetings, yes, I will invite virtual meetings. I'm expecting to have at least 2 meetings, virtual meetings, and then, as I mentioned, 1 in person. And then I believe this is a good level or good opportunity to work with what it has been mentioned here, with the core elements of this backbone of the treaty, of the text that we would like to see in INC5. So it could be for that. It could be also about process. It has to be also discussed with the HOTS and in the Bureau, of course, like Asha mentioned, for instance, about the working plan. It's important that we agreed on a clear roadmap towards INC5 that will give us also a great negotiations during this process. I would like also finally, I'm sorry to take some of your time to stress some of the aspects that you have mentioned here. As I hear, you know, from SIDS, so important means of implementation, financial and technologies, transfer, also international cooperation is critical aspects, and I agree completely with you. Also, what I would like to stress, how SIDS have highlighted the importance of protecting both the environment and human health from the impact of plastic pollution, and the importance of remediation of the existing plastic pollution. As I mentioned, I was in Rapa Nui, and I could see also how microplastics is affecting the islands and is affecting the living in the islands. And finally, to tell you that I'm quite happy to participate always in this meeting. Again, you know, SIDS are playing a critical role in showing what is needed and what is also possible in these negotiations, and you are leading with your example. Thank you very much once again. Happy to be with you this time and anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador Luteru, as well. Thank you to all of our panelists. We appreciate you all for taking the time to participate today on this very auspicious episode of SIDS Talk Plastics, celebrating 1 year and our 10th episode. I think that brings us to the end of our session, but we appreciate you attending and participating. Everyone, please have a great remainder of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you very much.